Buonasera e bentrovati alle conversazioni del Museo Ebraico di Lecce. Questa sera abbiamo il piacere di avere con noi un ospite speciale che parlerà in inglese. La conversazione di stasera sarà in inglese, ma vi consiglio di rimanere perché è veramente qualcosa di unico e di straordinario. Parleremo infatti di una collezione d'arte che è tra le più importanti collezioni private d'arte ebraica del mondo. È la collezione Braginsky di Zurigo e abbiamo il piacere di avere con noi questa sera il curatore della collezione. Il motivo di questo interesse è che la collezione Braginsky accoglie tra i suoi infiniti tesori alcuni pezzi estremamente significativi per la storia dell'ebraismo italiano e in modo particolare dell'ebraismo pugliese. Noi diciamo spesso che l'ebraismo pugliese è qualcosa che va ricercato anche lontano dalla Puglia. Molto spesso è più facile trovare tracce di questo ebraismo lontano dalla Puglia piuttosto che in Puglia. Ecco, per esempio, è il caso della collezione Braginsky. E vedremo perché, vedremo che cosa la collezione accoglie e insieme a queste testimonianze il curatore Emile Schrijver, che adesso tra poco apparirà su questo schermo, ci racconterà tante altre bellissime storie di questa collezione e dei suoi tesori. Now I switch to English. Hi everybody, and thank you for being with us at this conversation of the Jewish Museum in Lecce. Tonight we have a special treat for you because we have a special guest, a wonderful person. We will be dealing with the Braginsky collection in Zurich, one of the most important collections of Judaica all over the world, private collections of Judaica and Jewish art all over the world. Our special guest tonight is Professor Emile Schrijver of the University of Amsterdam, where he teaches the history of the Jewish book. And besides, he's the director of the Jewish Historical Museum in Amsterdam, and he is the curator of the Braginsky collection. With Professor Schrijver, we will be pleased, we will be delighted to hear a lot of wonderful information about the treasures hosted at the Braginsky collection. And the reason why we are so interested, and especially interested, is that the Braginsky collection has houses many masterworks, important pieces related to Italian Judaism, and especially related to Apulian Judaism. So Professor Schrijver will introduce us to some of these special treasures, and she will be casting light on the nature of this special collection, and we will be dealing, especially highlighting some majors in the collection that are related to Apulia, to Puglia. So let's introduce our guest. Good evening. Professor Schrijver is in his office in Amsterdam right now, and we are very pleased to hear your words, and thank you for accepting our invitation. We are really honored to have you here. Thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's one of the, with all the disadvantages that this crisis has brought to us, the ease of communication that the new media brought to us is very positive. I would not have minded to fly to Lecce actually to come and do this in person, but this is probably the best second, let's say second best option. When I started to work for René Braginsky is more than 13 years ago. René Braginsky is 13 years ago, 1-3. René Braginsky is a collector from Zurich. I had known of a collector from Zurich who had been buying a lot of interesting Judaica material, but nobody really knew who he was. And in 2007, I got a phone call from a colleague at from Sotheby's and the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York, saying there is this collector in Zurich whom you want to meet. He wants to do an exhibition. I was working in the university library in Amsterdam in those days, and he wanted to do an exhibition of Hebrew manuscripts from his collection, and he wanted to start in Europe, not in the United States. I went to Zurich. He invited me to come to Zurich to see his collection, and it really took me 2 or 3 visits to get to understand the nature of what I was seeing. We were talking about approximately 700 to 800 pieces of first-class handwritten Hebrew books, Ketubot, illuminated marriage contracts, Megillot, illuminated Esther Scrolls used for the Purim festival, and the quality of the material was unheard of. And he was largely unknown to the world of collectors. Nobody knew him. So we decided to do an exhibition, and we decided to start off this exhibition in Amsterdam, went into negotiation with the Yeshiva University Museum in New York, into negotiation with the Israel Museum, and into negotiations with the National Museum of Switzerland, because we wanted to do this, make this into an international exhibition on the occasion of his 60th birthday by then. So the first exhibition was in Amsterdam in 2009. This is about the time that I want to share my screen and start my PowerPoint and give you a sense of what's going on. I will go to my PowerPoint now. The Braginsky collection, we produced a number of catalogs. We produced in the left-hand side an English catalog. For the Swiss exhibition, we produced a German catalog, and its collecting effort really started with a manuscript that was not Italian, from the Austrian place of Deutschkreuz, because when his son turned 13, almost 30 years ago now, he wanted to have a prayer book to say the grace after meals, to say the special prayer for the meal, and he didn't have anything proper in his collection. So he started to look for materials that he found of interest, and he decided that he would start off as a collector. He started buying small things. Then he bought this Bencher, the Grace After Meals, a prayer book with special prayers for the meal, and he bought it. This is 1751. It's Austrian, but this was really one of the first pieces that he bought, and it was this family occasion that made it happen. And as I said to you already, it's between 700 and 800 pieces now. It's a little bit more than 800 probably. So we did not 4 but 5 exhibitions. We went to Amsterdam, to New York, Jerusalem, Zurich, and also to the Jewish Museum in Berlin in 2014. And ever since, we have been lending materials from the collection to other museums as well. The truth is that what we say, and we also have a website. This is what the Amsterdam exhibition looked like, with a number of Ketubot on display, with a lot of the books on display, with the Esther Scrolls on display on the wall, mounted onto the wall, because an Esther Scroll is really an object that is used in the family and in synagogue to read the book of Esther, to read the biblical book of Esther. But it's a 3-dimensional object, and we wanted to show it as a 3-dimensional object. We called this is the exhibition in Jerusalem, and we called the book A Journey Through the Jewish World. His collecting efforts are based around the idea that he wants to collect materials from as many places where Jews have lived all over the world in the diaspora as possible. And this is the exhibition in Jerusalem, again with the Ketubot, with the Megillot mounted on the wall. This is the exhibition in Zurich, and with the Megillot on the wall again, and with all the wonderful Ketubot. The total collection of Ketubot is approximately 170, and the total collection of Megillot is approximately 120. And these are among the rest are manuscript books like the one that we have here. And this is an image of René Braginsky in the Berlin exhibition. And the Berlin exhibition was very, very modern design, with the Megillot again mounted on the wall. To give you a sense, and we have, that is very important, we have a website, braginskycollection.com. And the braginskycollection.com website gives access to more than 100 items from the collection, all the books, page per page, all the scrolls, image per image, and all the Ketubot really in the largest possible detail. And within a week or 2 from now, I think we will be launching an iPad app which also gives full access to the material that we've put online. But what we put online is approximately 20% of the entire collection, and the rest is not online yet because we're still working on cataloging those materials. So his collections are basically 3 groups of items: handwritten books, some printed books, but largely books written by hand, handwritten Esther Scrolls, and handwritten and decorated marriage contracts. Those are the important items in his collection, and I would say Jewish manuscript, not only Hebrew, but the large majority of the material, of course, is in Hebrew. He owns approximately 80 medieval manuscript, which is a lot for a private collection, because most of the private collectors that own medieval manuscript own a few handful, and that is an important collection already. But he has 80 manuscripts. There is a group of manuscripts, the ones like the one that I showed to you, the grace after meals, with the prayers for the meals, a group of manuscripts that were produced in the 18th century in Central Europe, Ashkenazic manuscript, High German manuscripts, with from the communities of Central Europe and Germany. The largest collection of those manuscripts in the world is based, but the public collection is based in New York at the Jewish Theological Seminary, the rabbinical seminary in New York of the conservative movement. His collection is 80. So 50 in the largest public collection and 80 in the largest private collection. So that is quite an amazing number. So this is really one important collection, and I think we struck the world really with awe over the quality of the collection when we first published it. So it's online. It will be available on an app, and it is available in a lot of manuscripts. And this is the manuscript that was already referred to by Professor Lely, the Illuminated Medical License of Abraham de Balmes. Abraham de Balmes is one of the first Jewish doctors who was actually granted the permission. He was born in Lecce, and he was granted the permission to be active as a physician, to be active as a medical doctor, with a papal grant and with an illuminated medical license. And I think that after my presentation, we will start to discuss a little bit more. In 1510, he studied at the University of Naples, and so Napoli. And when the Jews were expelled from Napoli, 1510, he went to the University of Padua. And in Padua, he became, among others, the private Hebrew teacher of the Cardinal of Padua. And he really became a very important figure. And one of the things that is stipulated in this unique document, dated 1492 and now held in the Braginsky collection, is the fact that it was even allowed for Christians to be treated by him, and they would not transgress any rule by being treated by him. So he was given full permission to act as a medical doctor. And later on in Italy, I would say in the 17th, 18th century, especially in cities like Padua and Bologna, it was actually quite common for Jews to become medical doctors and to have their medical license or their medical degree being illuminated and has it as a beautiful document. And we have a few handfuls of such documents kept in Jewish collections all over the world. But to have a document as early as this one, 1492, the year of the expulsion of the Jews from Spain and Portugal, the year of the discovery of the Americas, and to have a document as early as this, dated exactly to the 4th and 5th of July 1492, when he defended and when he presented his knowledge and was allowed to become a medical doctor, that is absolutely a unique document. And it goes to show also him being born in Lecce, being one of the important figures in late medieval Italy. It's really a unique occasion, I would say. So this is really a document that I love to show to you, and this is the same document in a little bit more detail. It has a coat of arms, or more of a family weapon of the family, and it's a great piece of Jewish history, really. And of course, it's in Latin. It's not in Hebrew, which shows my point that a lot of the material is in Hebrew, but not everything. And this is, of course, if we're talking about a journey through the Jewish worlds, this is as much as a journey it can be. I mean, it's a journey through the Jewish world, but it's also the life of the Jews in the non-Jewish worlds in which they lived. So that is very important to keep in mind. So this is a unique document, beautifully illuminated, very nicely written. One of the things that I hate about digital presentations in general is the fact that we can see a lot, but we lose one aspect of the original, which is its size. The little manuscript that I showed to you first that René Braginsky started collecting with is a miniature manuscript that fits into your hand. This is an enormous document that is 50 centimeters high and a little bit wider even, and on the screen they all look the same. So that is an important aspect of the presentation that you have to keep in mind. Not everything that I showed to you is as big as your screen. I mean, it's very important to realize that. This is another very important piece. It's called the Harrison Miscellany. Miscellany is a manuscript that contains miscellaneous text, a number of different texts. And all these texts here have to do with marriage, with the aspect of Jewish marriage. And it's a very interesting piece. It has a number of poems, especially poems, that were sung at a wedding. It has special prayers for a wedding. It was certainly made as a wedding gift. And the poems were almost all made by a physician from the island of Corfu, Isaac Moldo. And it was done in 1720. He's a famous guy from Corfu. And it's quite clear that the manuscript was copied in Corfu, and also the script, of which you see a little fragment on the right-hand side of the image. Also, the script is from Corfu. But the images are clearly Italian. So what the theory is that the text was written perhaps in Corfu, perhaps even in Italy, but the images were almost certainly done in Italy, most likely in Venice, maybe elsewhere in Italy, but Venice seems the most likely. But what we see here is an image of creation. And we see here an image of creation with God, and God has the beams in front of his face, the halo in front of his face, which is a totally un-Jewish way of representing God. We're not supposed to represent God. So the representing God with the act during the act of creation is an image that can only have been done by a Christian artist. And there's another indication that it was a Christian artist at work here and not a Jewish artist, which is the fact that the Hebrew text, of course, runs from right to left, but the images follow the story of the biblical book of Genesis, the first book of the Hebrew Bible, first book of the Old Testament, and it starts with the creation. So this is the first image, but the first image appears at the end of the book, at the end of the Hebrew book. And if you follow the book of Genesis through the book from left to right, and you follow the Hebrew text from right to left, and there's hardly any connection between the two. So this is an assignment by Jews from a Christian artist who decided to do a Christian cycle of Genesis illustrations. And the interesting thing, of course, is twofold. First of all, that a Christian artist was commissioned by a Jewish family to produce a manuscript that is as close to the ritual as a manuscript that you do for a wedding. And the other thing is that they accepted the Christian imagery. So apparently the Christian images were so common to the Jews that they saw no problem in accepting the presence of such images inside a Hebrew manuscript, which is a very interesting phenomenon. So this is the Harrison Miscellany. It's available online. It has over 50 images, if I'm not wrong, maybe even more. So it's illustrated. Go to braginskycollection.com and you can see every page. It's a fascinating manuscript. In the collection is also a very important Esther Scroll. This is in fact the oldest dated Esther Scroll that exists in the world. The book of Esther is read during the Purim festival, and it describes the liberation of the Jews from the Persians in biblical times, from the book of Esther. And it's read in the family, and it's read in synagogue. And it is claimed that this is the only book in the Bible in which the name of God does not appear, that the Jews were slightly more lenient and slightly more felt freer to show to decorate it and to make a nice decoration. So this is a Megillah that was done in Venice in 1564, and it has an explicit date. And for those of you who can read the Hebrew, within the circle it says Anochi I, and I have to come a little bit closer. Stelina bat Hakatzim kvod Moreno Rabbi Menachem. So I, Stelina, daughter of Menachem, have copied this Megillah. So this is not only the first dated Esther Scroll that we have in the world, but it was also written by a woman. So we know of a few other manuscripts, especially in Italy. There's only one example outside Italy, but we do know of the involvement of women in the production of Hebrew books and manuscripts. So the first Hebrew printer in Mantua, Abraham Conat, worked together with his wife Estelina Conat. There was a scribe in Italy active in the 14th century by the name of Paula. But this is the first Megillah that we have, and it's the first one, the earliest dated one that we have was copied by a woman, a very unique appearance. And this is the beginning of that scroll with the blessings that are being said before reading the scroll. The decorations were probably done by someone else. So she only claims that she copied, that she did the writing, but she doesn't claim that she did the decoration. And all of this was done by hand, on parchment, and read during the Purim festival. And here we have the other image in more detail. This is another Megillah later, done in Italy, 1650. We don't know exactly where, for someone called Shlomo Marinozzi. And this is a Megillah that is beautiful for different reasons. It's decorated like the one that we saw from Stelina Bat Menachem, but this only has an opening panel with the coat of arms of the family Marinozzi, and it has a small inscription on the right, and it has a beautifully carved wooden handle. The wooden handle on the Stelina Bat Menachem Venice one is very simple, and here it's the wooden handle that makes the difference. This doesn't even have a handle. This is a Megillah that was done in Venice, 1675. The decoration that you see here was printed. So it was printed onto the parchment with a printing press. The Hebrew writing, is by hand, and the coloring is also by hand. So it's a combination of techniques. It's printed imagery, handwritten text, and hand coloring. And sometimes it's just a proper text. This is either Venice or Rome, we don't know exactly. And it has a beautiful case. So sometimes it's kept on a wooden roller, on a simple wooden roller, on a carved wooden roller. Some Megillot no longer have a roller. It's not like the Sefer Torah, not like the Torah Scroll in synagogue where you have two rollers. It only has one roller. And here it has a beautiful golden case. And cases like this, we don't have many. We know of only 3 cases of this design. One in another private collection in Zurich, the Jesusson collection, and one in the collection of the Jewish Museum in New York. And this is the 3rd. Otherwise, golden decoration in Hebrew art, we know most of that art will come from the Far East, or from, let's say, from India, the Middle East, and further on east, and not from Italy. So it's very uncommon to have that. This is another Venetian Megillah, beautifully done, a huge Baroque piece. I mean, again, the length of this one, of the earlier one that I'm showing to you, this is 1/3 of the height of this one. This is an enormous scroll. It's more than 6 meters wide and 70 centimeters high. And this is a typical Italian Baroque, almost Rococo piece of art. And the imagery and the iconography is hardly Jewish. I mean, we see this book of Esther starts with a scene of a banquet, of a dinner scene, and we see a banquet on top of it, but it's not the banquet that is being described in the book of Esther. It can be any banquet. And here we have a little more detail, and here you see even more detail. I have to move away. I'm using a strange. We have a slight presentation issue, so sometimes you see my thing. This is another one. Beautiful scene. Here another one. So this goes on and on and on. 6 meters wide. Just one illustration after the other. And this is a Megillah printed in Amsterdam, printed borders, a handwritten text, an ivory roller, not a wooden roller, but a roller made of ivory, done in Amsterdam by an artist who came from Mantua, went from Mantua to Amsterdam, which was the most important, one of the most important centers of Hebrew printing in the 17th century. And he became active in the Amsterdam book market and brought the tradition of illuminating, of decorating Esther scrolls to Amsterdam. And this is the Italian fashion becoming fashionable in Amsterdam. And we also have a Megillah that was entirely drawn by hand by the same scribe, Salom Italia, who's obviously called Italia. Well, he was from Italy. That doesn't need explanation. And this is a printed Hebrew Bible, a Hebrew Bible with Italian glosses. So it's the Hebrew text of the Bible and his Italian commentaries, clearly made for a market of non-Jews, most likely, in Venice in 1739. It has illustrated frontispieces, a number of them, by Francesco Crisellini. Crisellini was a very important artist in Venice in the middle of the 18th century, and he also did a Megillah. So the border of this Megillah was printed by Crisellini, and the text was copied by an immigrant scribe, Aryeh Yehuda Leib ben Daniel of Koresh, which is in Eastern Europe. And that same Aryeh Yehuda Leib ben Daniel of Koresh also did another one in 1746. But here he didn't only do the writing, he also did the drawing on the border. So this one is printed borders, handwritten text. This one is handwritten text, but also hand-drawn borders. So we basically see all the techniques combined, and this is a fuller shot of that entire Megillah. This is another Megillah with from either from Ancona or from Lugo, and this is it's parchment, but it's the technique that we call paper cut. So this is all the decoration that you see here between the Hebrew script was cut by hand. So it's very very detailed kind of work. It's very brittle today. And all the white holes that you see in the decoration is the background, so it's transparent. So it's beautifully done, and that is a technique that we also know from ketubot. And this is a ketubah from illuminated marriage contracts. This is a ketubah from the city of Lugo, and the city of Lugo was very well known for its fantastic production of ketubot. The ketubah is a legal document, and it's read in the synagogue. It is made out for the woman, for the bride, and it's read in the synagogue aloud, and it stipulates not only the names of the bride and groom and of the families of their respective fathers, but also the dowry and the amount of money and the amount of other materials that the bride would take with her into the marriage. And it also addresses the rights that she has as a married woman. So it was a gift. It's a legal document, but also a gift to the bride, and which is one of the reasons why it was decided oftentimes to decorate it beautifully. Even more so, it was decided, and this is a totally Italian custom originally, even more so, it is also the moment at the fact that the amount of money stipulated, and it's the legal moment that the wedding is taking place. It's also the moment that everybody pays attention, and it was also a moment to show off, to show to your community how wonderfully you could, what you could afford, and how wonderfully you could have a ketubah produced. So it was also an element of presentation and an element of show off for the audiences. So that is, and this went pretty far. The rabbis of Ancona in the second half of the 18th century and in the first half of the 19th century, two times stipulated a maximum amount of money that a Jewish family was allowed to spend on the production of a ketubah, because people were running into competition. They were spending more and more money on artistic wedding documents, and these, of course, are now collector's items. They're still kept in many Italian communities as well, but they are really collector's items, and there's not a single Jewish museum in the world that doesn't have it. I'm going to skip this because of the time. This is another ketubah from Venice, a Phoenician ketubah, copied in 1648. And this is a huge piece again. This is more than 70 centimeters high. This is something that you don't see here. It has two columns. On the right, it has the column with the actual Aramaic text of the marriage contract. And on the left, it has a column with the so-called Tanaim Achronim, the further stipulations, the further conditions that define the marriage. And at the bottom, you can see the signatures of the witnesses who were witness to the wedding, because such a document is only legal if it's being signed by a number of these witnesses. This again, it's very detailed, and to give you a sense of the detail, this is probably the coat of arms or the family insignia of the family. We don't know which family it is, but it is the family insignia. The majority of the decoration that you see here, the black lines, again, are printed. The coloring was done by hand. So this is again, and the handwriting, of course, was also done by hand. So the Hebrew is done by hand, the coloring is done by hand, but the large majority, not everything, but the large majority of the black lines that you see is actually a printed image onto the parchment. So there was really a market, and here you have the signatures of the witnesses in the Hebrew text, and of course, if you go back around the imagery, we see around the imagery, we see the signs of the zodiac. We see all kinds of other scenes. We see references to biblical texts about bride and groom. It's a very, very detailed kind of decoration. Typically, decorations in such ketubot will also have a reference to biblical figures that bear the same name as the bride and groom. So if the groom is called Jacob, there will be an image of the biblical Jacob. So that is something that you can see here as well. But this is a very detailed kind of thing, and you can see the quality of the imagery, the quality of the handwriting, and this wonderful combination of printing on the one hand and of hand coloring on the other hand, handwriting yet on the other hand. So it's an interesting phenomenon that is typically Italian, I would say, and was then later on copied all over the Jewish world. And the Hebrew text read, on the fourth day of the week, the 14th day of the month of Tishri, in the year 5409, according to the creation of the world, according to the counting that we use here in the city of Phoenicia, the city that is lying on the river, that lies on the bank of the sea. Then the honored and very much honored bride David, son of the deceased Joseph Franco, the Almeida, told the bride, the virgin, the humble virgin, Duna Vedita, daughter of the Honorable Daniel Valenzin, be my wife, and let's stay together forever. So this is a very interesting piece, and I could go on forever, but I agreed to speak to you for let's say for the 20 minutes. I think I'm ready to finish. I hope that what you've seen here is just a glimpse into a private collection. It's a unique private collection for its holdings, but it is also unique for another reason. Many collectors, let's put it differently. Every collector has a different reason why he wants to collect, how he or she wants to collect. Many collectors collect because they want to own. They have a particular connection to the objects that they own, and they want to show it to a small group of people. And only few collectors realize that what they have is a treasure that is there for the rest of the learned world, for the rest of the Jewish world, for the rest of the non-Jewish world to enjoy and to learn from. And we are very happy that René Braginsky is so interested in producing high-quality websites, in supporting research into his collection, in allowing Jewish museums all over the world to show items from his collection. And a little piece of news for the future. Some of you will know that in Israel at this moment, in Jerusalem, the state of Israel is building, or the new building is being made for the National Library of Israel. It's on the corner of the road between the Israel Museum and the Knesset, the Parliament, and there's an enormous piece of land that is now being on which is now being built, supported by the Rothschild Foundation, supported by the Gottesman Foundation, and there's a new Jewish library being built, the National Library of Israel, and the first temporary exhibition that will be shown in that new building is a Braginsky exhibition, where we will combine the holdings of the Braginsky collection with the holdings of the Israel Museum. So much for my introduction.
So, Emile, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I have no words to express my thanks to this wonderful survey of unbelievable, amazingly beautiful items of the Braginsky collection that let us understand the combinations of styles, techniques. This is something I especially adore. This, for instance, the stressing of the different usage of, for instance, papers, parchment, or printing techniques with handwritten traditional techniques, illumination that comes from Christian workshops on something that is produced for a Jewish community. That makes this Jewish tradition so important for the non-Jewish society, and this is exactly what we like to stress to our visitors in the Museum of Lecce, that this has been an ongoing relationship between different societies that were and still are working together in the same environment and sharing very common products and cultural devices, so to say. And this is really very important, that is possible to see this beauty in a private collection. And it's really unbelievable what you said, and I'm still amazed at this beauty.
Interesting what you're saying is that I gave an interview to a Swiss journal recently, and I was asked about my personal utopia for Jewish culture in Europe, and I answered, my utopia for Jewish culture in Europe is that at last, after so many centuries, the non-Jewish world will become aware of the fact that what we present when we present Jewish culture is European culture, it's Western culture, it's not Oriental culture. We're always being viewed as an Oriental culture, as an outsider, but we are totally integrated into the European culture, and that is for me the most essential thing. And Jewish art shows this to an extent that is almost, you can see it with your own eyes. This is what I was showing to you, is Italian art, and it's so closely related to Italy. I could have done the same thing for the Netherlands. I could have done the same thing for Russia. I could do it anywhere based on this collection, based on other collections. What we're showing is an integral part of the culture of a society, and the Jews are not maybe seen by outsiders, but they are maybe seen as outsiders, but they are an integral part of what's going on in this in every country, and the Jewish art shows this very clearly.
Yeah, and all the more so since we are dealing with, for instance, Apulian Judaism, which is what matters more for our purpose here. Apulian Judaism that is, now it's being revived by the contemporary communities, but it's not as important, as thriving as it used to be in the Middle Ages, for instance. For instance, now we are. We have a lot of questions, and we want to answer the questions. But before answering the questions,
interesting question
this is probably related. I wanted to stress on especially dealing with the two documents that, in my opinion, are mainly related to Apulian Judaism. The first one, the license of Abraham de Balmes, is in Latin, as you were saying, of course, because this is a Latin document related to a Jewish physician who had to know Latin because in order to defend his dissertation, he had to show that he knew Latin. And this is very interesting for my interests because those Jewish physicians, especially all over the Middle Ages, they while knowing Latin in order to undergo the examinations, because sometimes they had to take private exams in Latin while being forbidden to attend the university because they were Christian university. So the only way they had to get the diploma, the degree, was to show up at examinations at the end of the course, like private students or something like that. And but while knowing Latin, while being obliged to know Latin, they translated both Latin and non-Latin texts into Hebrew for their own medical usage, which is very interesting because they were translating Arabic texts into Hebrew, medical texts, I mean, then they were translating them into Latin or into vernacular languages, Western vernacular languages. But at the same time, they were translating Latin and Italian texts, for instance, into Hebrew for the usage of the community of Jewish physicians who could, be provided with this enormous corpus of medical knowledge for their studies. So it's interesting because what you were correctly saying, it's an ongoing interference of Western and Eastern motives.
And of languages and of materials.
And of languages and of art.
You mentioned physicians, but there was this instance of Moses D'Arieti. D'Arieti was a very important physician, also from Italy.
Yeah.
And in Leiden University, there's a manuscript in Hebrew letters in Italian.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, he was, for instance, he was a wonderful philosopher. He knew a lot about the philosophy, scholastic philosophy of the contemporary period. So he could deal with the philosophy in the local language, which was Latin or Italian. The Italian he used to speak in his local language, but he was writing that in Hebrew characters, for instance. So it's a mixture of traditions and so on. So this for what relates to the medical license of Abraham de Balmes. For the Harrison Miscellany, this is more interesting to me because it's not only related to Corfu, but it's also some of the texts, the wedding texts, the texts for the wedding ceremonies came from Apulia because some of the poets represent, it's not only the Mordo, it's not only poems by the Mordo, but it's also a miscellany of poems by other poets that were included in the Corfioti Mazo, in the Corfioti Siddur, for instance, especially related to the wedding ceremonies. And there are, for instance, some poems by a poet from Otranto, Szabetai of Otranto. It's a beautiful poem, wedding poem. And the idea, for me, this is very interesting. The idea of relating Genesis, the book of Genesis, to the wedding is also related to some poems that were very peculiar in the Balkans and in Apulia that made a connection between the wedding ceremony and God's creation. So we saw a question right now on the relation between the creation and the godly image and so on and so forth. But it's also related to the wedding ceremonies and the poems for wedding ceremonies, which were very popular in Apulia. We have very interesting poems, wedding poems, that relate the godly presence in creation to marriage. So this is very interesting. And all this beautiful collection of ketubot, wedding
Yeah.
is also related to astronomy, astrology, different kinds of art between East and West. If you think of the ancient synagogues in the land of Israel that could be decorated with the zodiac signs, and you find the zodiac signs in Mausoleum, in Italian mausoleum from the Renaissance period, and then you find them in ketubot, especially those decorated in Venice or in Ancona. Ancona was one of the most important places, and Corfu as well was very important place for the decoration of ketubot. So it's so interesting seeing all these, and then you find all that in Amsterdam, because of course Venetian people, other people from the Mediterranean ended up in Amsterdam. So it's
all a mix up. It's very typical of the Jewish world. I think that for the Harrison Miscellany, if you look at the image of God that is in there, I like your connection to the story of Genesis. And what's interesting is that if you look at the choice of scenes from the story of Genesis, a lot of it is connected to women acting in the book of Genesis. So a lot of the images are female actors, which again shows that it was clearly made to this purpose.
I remember
to go from left to right and from right to left, and it's really the only manuscript. There's one other example in Budapest, but there it was covered later. It's the only example that I have of an image of God that is being accepted inside the Jewish manuscript. It's totally unheard of. Jews are not very reluctant to do two-dimensional reproductions of normal scenes. You can have perhaps the face covered, or have a griffin or a bird's head or whatever. But the fact that we have so many manuscripts and with illuminations, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of manuscripts with illuminations, shows that the Jews didn't have a problem with two-dimensional representation of the reality. Three-dimensional is totally different, but there was one exception, and the one exception is God. And this manuscript has the representation of God, and it has another one. It has this one, and there's a second one also in Paradise. And that is, and the fact that, and we see a lot more. I mean, in the 18th century Haggadot, Passover rituals, we see images of the temple with a cross on the top, because they used an image of a church. I mean, so clearly the Jews lived in Christian worlds, were used to Christian imagery, and were apparently used to Christian imagery to the extent that they accepted clearly Christian content in the core of their Jewish items. And this is integration like you would never see before.
But if I may add, this is very interesting, because I've always read that the decorator of the Harrison Miscellany probably was a Christian decorator, a Christian illuminator.
That's what I also think.
But still, it is evident that the one who commissioned the manuscript was a Jewish family, probably the Demordo family, because God is represented. You can't see the face of God.
No, he's represented.
And this is exactly related to Exodus, because it's and the fact that you were thinking of the beams of the rays, of the sun rays, which is a Christian image, but it was also related to Moses, and Moses, who could not see the face of God, but only his back. So it's such
very interesting.
Such a picture of things, and so interesting. So interesting.
I see
amazing.
Ruth question also. I want to answer Ruth Gruber's question.
I'd like to know more about that. Yes.
So first of all, hi Ruth, nice that you're there. The truth is that he doesn't really know what's going to happen with the collection. So he's closely connected to first of all, he's a young man. He only turned 70. So he's not. It's not that. I mean, if he lives up to 120, we have 50 years to go. but it's a huge collection, and the truth is that one should ask whether it is really, there's no market for a collection as big as this. It took him a lifetime collecting it, and I would say the power of the market is not strong enough to deal with that. He's aware of that. The collection will be, he has one son, the collection will clearly belong to his son in the future, and he doesn't want to, and we're now collecting it, we know exactly what we have, or cataloging it, we know exactly what it may end up in a public collection, it may not end up, it will certainly not end up in a Braginsky museum. He made a very clear point of that he's not interested in having his own museum, for a very interesting reason. He says it's very easy to buy a building and put up a museum, but to take over, to hand over the responsibility for the rest of into eternity for a collection like that is something totally different. So the I don't know, it will remain in the family for sure. It may, and it in the future they may have different options, and they may have different considerations what to do and what not to do. But it will remain in the family for now, and it will be available to the general public within the limits of professional, let's say, professional dealing with wonderful, valuable items like this, and historically valuable items like this. I mean, if we were to answer, so this first Megillah that I showed you, the 1564 Phoenician Megillah, Esther Scroll, done by a woman, I think I get requests from Italy 3 or 4 times a year for museums who want to see that, because it's a unique piece. It's a unique piece. It was done in the ghetto of Venice, and it's shortly after the ghetto, within the second decade of the existence of the ghetto, and it's an unbelievable historical document. But if we show it in museums and don't keep it properly, it will not be there in 20 years. So we have to be very careful as well, and that is an element of collecting that people are usually not aware of. It is one thing to purchase the valuable items and to go through all the work that is necessary to do a proper purchase, but you also take on the responsibility for historically valuable documents. And so that means that you have to have a storage that is on museum level. It means that you have to do digitization in order for you to be able to follow the development of the objects. Parchment is a natural product, it's animal skin. Parchment is dried animal skin. So if you keep that under the wrong conditions, it will decay. And it can take 10 years, it can take 20 years or 30 years, but these items have survived for hundreds of years. So you have to take over the responsibility also for professional upkeeping of a collection like that, and that is something that he takes very seriously, and this is also the reason why he doesn't simply want to give it to want to build his own museum and remain. And the other thing is his modesty. He doesn't. I mean, he's interested in sharing it with the world, but not in building his own personal monument. So it's but the truth is, so the real answer to Ruth Gruber's question is nobody knows.
So thank you very much. Really, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say that I'm seeing Giancarlo Lacerenza showing up with a message of his. I just wanted to remind our audience that the Avram de Balmes license has been translated and published in Sefer Yuchassin in an article by Giancarlo Lacerenza. And this is very important to know because there is an important piece of evidence for Southern Italian Judaism, and this is important to know that this is available also in Italian translation.
And there's also a very easy trick if you want to see it online. If you type Abraham de Balmes and then connect it with the word Sotheby's, because that's where it was bought, you get a very strong image. It was done by Sotheby's and a very nice description.
Yeah, absolutely.
So go online, Abraham de Balmes, Sotheby's, and you can see it in quite some detail.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the catalog. The first time I saw the diploma was on the.
So it's a very easy access. That's very easy access.
Yeah, amazing. So, just one more question. Is it possible to visit the Braginsky collection? Maybe some of our. I think it's not really. Yeah.
No, it's private. We have a no. It's too private for that. So we do our exhibitions. We have our online presence, and we do occasional visits to the collection. But it's something that really has to be done well in advance, because it's kept in a private atmosphere. So
That's what I guess. Yeah, exactly. So the best thing would be to have a wonderful exhibit at some important museum in Italy somewhere, where we'll be able to see the display of these marvelous objects.
Exactly.
So thank you.
Yoshi is right.
Yossi.
You can buy the book. It's still available. The English, the German is available. And you can go online.
No, but the website of the Braginsky collection is absolutely magnificent. It's really worth seeing, and it's magnificent. It's a real treat for the eye.
Available on your iPad very soon. Yeah. I'm finishing the iPad app right now. Yeah.
So, Emile, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I wish to repeat that all of our interviews, the conversations are available online, so you can watch them in the following days, in the next few days, and you can keep asking questions. And I hope Emile will find the time to answer any possible questions that may arise from this wonderful conversation. And again, thank you very much.
My pleasure, and thanks to all the anonymous people in the background listening or watching. Yeah.
We'll be in touch. Thank you again, and thank you our watchers and viewers and listeners and followers. And I only want to remind you that we will have another very interesting conversation this coming Thursday. It's also related to the Historical Museum of Amsterdam, the Jewish Historical Museum of Amsterdam. This time we'll be dealing, though, with contemporary art. So it's another very, very interesting subject. It's Jewish contemporary art and the memory of the Holocaust, the memory of the Shoah. And we'll be discussing that in light of other pieces of contemporary art that we are presently displaying in our museum in Lecce. So, yes, Giancarlo Lacerenza is asking, which book were you mentioning? And Yossi Hayes, who's one of our best friends and followers, is answering the question. A gorgeous book.
It's called A Journey Through Jewish Worlds.
Exactly, the one you were mentioning before. So again,
thank you. On the website. There's a reference on
the yes, and absolutely visit the website of the Braginsky collection. Yes, Amsterdam and Lecce.
This is our connector. Yeah.
And thank you, Gary, for making the connection. And of course, we'll be delighted to receive Emile whenever he wants to come visit our small museum in Lecce. And
don't repeat that too often. Yeah. I will come. Yeah.
Thank you very much again, and see you this coming Thursday on our conversation page on Facebook, and be in touch. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye. Take care.